back. I'm Shane Stanford.
And I'm Anthony Thaxton. Thanks for joining us. Abraham, courage, or something like it.
Oh, Father Abraham.
Father.
You know, this is one of those stories, Anthony, that we know so much about Abraham. There really is a lot about this man's story. And it is easy to try to pick and choose the things that you like, the things that maybe you don't like, kind of gravitate towards the good. I can't tell you how many times, as I've been preaching now for 30 years, every time I come across Abraham, a good friend gave me advice. He said, if you're going to try to preach one part of Abraham, you need to somehow preach the whole story of Abraham every time, because the whole story of Abraham really is what the power of the covenant is about. And what we talked about today, of course, was how Abraham was given this promise, this covenant by God, and Abraham did what many of us would do. He sort of was like, that's awesome, God. Kind of chuckle, you know.
Yeah,
great.
Gotcha, sure. Okay.
And Abraham and Sarah wanted children. They wanted to be able to have an heir. And in the number of things they did, some of them directly against God's promises, to try to facilitate that on their own. The biggest story, of course, was when Sarah gave her handmaiden to Abraham and said, sleep with her, make a child. Well, Abraham was more than willing to oblige. Okay. Yes. Yeah. And what happened?
Instead of saying, God has promised us this,
yes,
we're going to trust and have courage and faith in what God has said, maybe he needs a little help. Maybe we'll take care of this.
And you know, reading back in the context of this, just like we talked about in the intro about Peter, it's easy for us to be condemning of Abraham. Oh my goodness, what in the world? We would have never done that. Well, of course, everyone knows that it's easy to look back on a situation and say, these are the things somebody should have done. What I want you to do is, and Anthony and I talked a lot about this, is put yourself in the context of Abraham and Sarah. They've relocated their lives from the place where they grew up, the place that they knew. They've gone through some really horrific situations getting over to this promised land of where God has called them to be. And now God is saying, I want you to believe the impossible. What would you do, Anthony, if the impossible?
If somebody, I'm not as old as Abraham was, but if somebody told me that today, I said, nah, I don't see that happening.
No, and I'm not sure I would want that to happen, but at the same time...
Especially when God said, your descendants are going to be like the sands on the beach and the star in the sky. You know, God waxes poetically. It's going to be countless, numerous, unlimited number, and you're like, wow, okay.
Yeah, he went from yes, and I'm just talking about one God.
Yeah.
And here we are moving into talks about generations, but what you find in the story is a very human story, and that is what happens after Hagar, the handmaiden, gets pregnant with Ishmael. Is that Sarah's normal human response kicks in. She becomes very jealous. She too becomes pregnant, and therefore when that part of the promise is fulfilled, she then does what her human side wants her to do and tells Abraham, you got to send Hagar away and Ishmael away. And that, to me, is one of the sadder stories in the Old Testament, because again, when we talk about generational repercussions, today you hear the story of Isaac and Ishmael. It is the battle of the brothers, the half-brothers, and to this day, the children of Judah are considered to be the descendants of Isaac, and the children of Ishmael are considered to be the Arabs, and the discontent remains to this day. When you think about the decisions that we've made where we choose not that we're going to condemn God or not believe Him, but we're going to not believe Him fully.
Yeah. We're
going to believe the parts we can get our brain around. We're going to forget the parts that seem a little bit out of bounds. The thing is, Anthony, I've been through things in my life where you had to believe the whole story. C.S. Lewis used to say, if you're going to read one chapter, you need to read all the chapters.
Well, it makes me think of one of the contemporary examples that we used with Craig Groeschel of Life Church. I can remember years ago that this was the church that first made me want to do this type of thing to
Sure.
how can I use. I had no idea you could be a media minister for a church. I mean, I grew up in smaller churches. You could run the sound booth, but that was about it.
That's right.
But the idea that you could do television, that you could do all these things. Well, Life Church made me see that. And we went and visited in Oklahoma. And but Craig tells a story about one of his mentors. And Craig Rochelle's the founder of Life Church. It's their largest multi-campus congregation in the country, and Craig has written some great books, but he went to his mentor and he said, I've got to share this audacious idea with you. I think God has led us to the idea of having multiple campuses. We're going to have 100 campuses, and I think I'm claiming it.
Yeah.
And he looks at his mentor to see about this audacious idea, and the mentor shakes his head and says, you young people, always thinking so small.
So small.
And it makes me think of Abraham, that Abraham couldn't even conceive of the idea that we're going to conceive one child, let alone the father of nations.
Yes.
And yet that's the plan that God had for him. And it's kind of sad that he wasn't able to live into that and see that and just claim that early on.
Well, and you see too that the decision he made in not believing God, not trusting God, and Sarah too, had this enmity was created in other people around them. Hagar, Ishmael. You had to know that it had effects down the road with Isaac. You still have a whole list of stories that have to do with Isaac, and then Isaac and his sons, Jonah and Esau, and you're dealing with what happens when we choose not to embrace what happens in God's economy. God's economy knows no shortages. God's economy knows no bankruptcies. God's economy is a full economy where everyone has what they need and everyone has a particular part to play. And that's part of the discussion for you guys. As you're doing this study, what is it about this lesson? We call it courage or something like it, where it just is courage, where you do trust the Lord and not try to identify and to shape and to make it into something that you want it to be. It really is a game changer.
And sometimes when it seems that all is lost, we're way too old to have children, so we'll never have that dream. It does remind me of the other instance of the Lion and Winter movie that we put in the story of how the princes are down in the dungeon waiting for the father to come kill them so that he can have new heirs. And it says, you idiot, what does it matter how you act when we're about to be killed? And the quote was, when the fall is all there is, it matters.
Yeah.
And I think if we're in a situation like Abraham and saying, God can't possibly do this, we don't know what God has. Even when it seems all is lost, God does have an abundance, and he has a way of surprising us.
He does. And that is really the moral of the story, is that even in the midst of this, God does make the generations like the stars in the sky. He does answer and keep his promises, even when we work so hard not to have them fulfilled in our lives. Can I pray for it?
Sure.
Gracious God, I just thank you so much for the story of Abraham and for his imperfections and for the human side of who he is. It's so easy, Lord, for us to venerate stories and to make them more than what the real lesson is. And the lesson here is the humanity of Abraham and Sarah and what happens when we don't fully trust that what you've told us is what you intend. And God, I want to pray for those out there who need the strength and the courage, not something like it, but courage to be able to stand faithful in what you have promised. We love you. We thank you. We ask all this in Jesus.